So to align that to your strategy of adoption and change management, I like to think of it as, look at the culture that you're going to, make sure we've got the right people being trained in the right way, make sure we're educating not just technical people, we're educating the business, we're educating how we are going to move to this new world of working and what that brings and how that helps us and what opportunities it brings. And then making sure that we communicate that across the different elements. And if you haven't thought about any of these four and you're looking at just one as your strategy, you will find it hard to convince everybody and bring everybody along with you, and have success of this whole migration. So, think about the different groupings of users that are going to be affected by it. Make sure the business is on board. If the business is not 100% supporting this, it's almost impossible for it to succeed. IT cannot drive it. IT are going to be there to make sure that the key pieces are implemented, like your telephony, your voice integration, migrating data, moving from SharePoint on premises to SharePoint online. Do we do SharePoint Online versus Teams? Do we do a blended approach? There's all these different questions that are going to be asked that can impact IT, business, and the users and the ways of working. So make sure we're building that program that aligns to all these different groups within the business. And the other thing that I think about, in comparison to a few years ago, if any of you have been involved in a project where you've implemented, say, an upgrade from SharePoint, Exchange, maybe you've got some other platform services that you were using. Traditionally, we would go through a 4 to 5 year cycle where you would implement servers, IT would learn how to set them up, they'd build them, they'd build the environment, and then you'd train the users, and they'd start using it in the way it was set up. And then nothing would change for many, many years. So it would more be a continued kind of, new starters would get the same training that the people had 2 years before. And that would be sufficient for most people to at least do that job and use that technology. But one of the things that's changed, obviously, is that Microsoft uses a much more agile approach to software. So tools that we had 2 years ago have been upgraded and feature released several times since then. And you don't get the ability to decide what you do and don't get. Microsoft pushes the changes out. You can decide how quickly you get them, but eventually they will roll out into your tenant. And so now you need to think about culture, train, educate, communicate as a service offering rather than a one-hit offering. Now, does that mean that you're going to save lots of money by going to the cloud? As Dimitri said, you will save money in many areas because you don't need those things anymore because they're being taken care of by cloud, by Microsoft hosting, by the lack of third-party vendors needed. So you will save money in some areas, but you are going to need to think about investing some of that money back into things like a service offering for things like a skills program or a service offering around IT constantly getting updated with the new capabilities, or learning a new service that Microsoft have released for a security implementation that will benefit users using mobile devices, to add that extra element of protection from data. So there is this continuous evolution that will not stop now. And to think it will stop and to think you're going to be able to control it is it's not going to happen. You will have to accept it as part of this transition to the cloud. And it's actually what makes hybrid harder to justify in the long term, because then you'll just end up managing two completely different mechanisms and platforms for this. And then it becomes, you're almost paying for both then, which becomes not very cost effective. So the key word that I think I always like to use when it comes to change management and adoption is sustainability. You have to build a sustainable program that aligns to the way that Microsoft and other cloud providers are going to be working with their technology to give you those services. It will evolve, it will be agile. You need to think about that in terms of your implementing this implementing these solutions into your business. And you can't think of it as a one hit. It will not work. If you think about this as a one hit, we set it up, we give it to the users, everything from then on is intuitive, which of course a lot of these platform vendors, and Microsoft included, will make people believe that this is so easy and obvious how we use these tools. You don't need to think about investing in any of these other elements, or just give them a couple of videos, they'll be fine. It doesn't work, and we've seen it doesn't work, and we've seen companies after 12 months threaten to go back on premises because they've believed the hype that it's just intuitive for the average user. And most average users, it's not intuitive, and the ways of working are not going to be the same. So if you do not build this approach, it will just become a very frustrated workforce ultimately, and we've seen it happen.